Hello and welcome. My name is Phil Naylor. Welcome to Tea with a Therapist. I provide these little talks once a week just to, um, sometimes I'm talking to myself. I'm clarifying my own ideas sometimes when I'm talking to. So they say sometimes the best way to learn something is to teach it. And so sometimes I think I'm teaching myself as well as sharing with other people. But anyway, for those who haven't caught these before, I'm Phil Naylor. I'm a psychotherapist, and I've been working as a psychotherapist and in mental health for over 20 years. And in the last 7 years, I've been in private practice, and so kind of get a chance to develop things the way they kind of naturally unfold for me. So I've kind of developed my own set of theories and ideas. I think that you'll find my ideas are not dissimilar to what's out there, but they're packaged in their own kind of unique way, I guess. So I have my own point of view, but part of my mission is to help people to gain an understanding of themselves and how psychotherapy works. Not just psychotherapy, how we psychologically work, and what is it that we need to do to kind of get ourselves out of places when we're not doing well. So I'm just sharing this sort of my perspective and the experience that I've gathered over quite a number of years, and hoping that people will benefit from this. So today I'm talking about kind of getting a perspective. And this follows on from the other things I've been talking about. I was talking last week about how to make change, how to create change, what's a process for creating changes that we're sometimes, when we're stuck in the moment, I talk about sometimes we're in stuck states, and how do we shift out of those particular states, whether the state is depression or anxiety or whatever particular state it is. I talked about first focused on shifting out of our physiological state, because whatever state we're in is combined with a physiological kind of a perceptual state and sort of thoughts that are accompanying it. So if we shift out of the physiological first, it's easier to shift out of the psychological, and so we can do one then the other. And then I started to touch on a little bit about changing a larger perspective. And so I spent most of the time talking about the first two things, and I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the bigger picture. How do we manage ourselves? How do we move forward in our lives? And how do we get perspectives that are helpful? So that's kind of like, sometimes I say, taking a step back and looking at the forest rather than the trees. And we often need to do that periodically. We get stuck in the trees, meaning that we're stuck in, just dealing with our day-to-day, what's in front of us, and trying to cope with that. And sometimes we need to come back and take the wider view. Sometimes people say the 30,000-foot view, as if they're up in a plane and looking down on their lives. And so we need to step back and regroup and adapt new ways of thinking, new ways of looking at the world. Because sometimes you get locked into a certain way of looking at the world. And that's part of our beliefs and our conditioning that gets us to the point of how we look at the world. It's a good conditioning experience. Sometimes I say that, the way we look at the world, our personalities even, are kind of a habit. They just kind of develop that way. And sometimes we need to look at those ideas and perspectives and kind of see if they're still valid or if those are helping us. And so sometimes with those, we have new ideas that are readily available to us, but we just don't bother kind of taking the time to actually think about them and implement them. So what do I mean? So sometimes it's like, well, what do we think is important in our lives? And a lot of times people are looking at, they just want to be comfortable. And I can be guilty of that myself. They get into their comfort zone, and this is, again, part of our unconscious patterns, that it's it's safer to feel like when we just know what we need to, we like to gravitate to the familiar, and we know how to do how we are, even if it's uncomfortable. And sometimes we'd rather just stay in an uncomfortable place because it's familiar rather than shift into um, a better place because it's unfamiliar and we don't know if it's actually going to be better. So we have to kind of have the idea that maybe comfort isn't the goal. And maybe that's not our goal in life. Maybe our goal, and if you look at it, is to grow, to develop who we are, to stretch ourselves, to make a contribution to the world. Um, so if we take the perspective that the world needs us, that can be a powerful perspective, that we have something to add to the world. And so our job is to deliver something out to the world. I guess I kind of took that perspective a little bit when doing this series here. It's like, well, maybe I need to offer something up, put something out there. And when we start to do things like that, we're really developing our sense of meaning. You know, what is it that a good way to think about, what's meaningful for us is what do we want to do? What would we like to contribute to out there, getting outside of ourselves, getting out beyond how can I take care of my needs? I just want to be safe. I just want to be comfortable. I just don't want any challenges. I just want this. I just want that. When we start to kind of think in the broader picture and think, what am I here for? What are my skills and abilities, and how can I contribute to the world? How can I be a positive force in the world? If you think about the idea that nothing that we do is neutral. It's either contributing something positively or contributing something negatively, and sometimes inaction is contributing something negatively because a change needs to be had and we're not doing anything. So sometimes, inactivity is not helpful. It moves us backwards. You could say even our thoughts, they're either taking us towards our goals or away from our goals. So we have to kind of look at our lives, look at our thoughts, look at how we're working and say, where am I going? What am I doing? And what am I creating? So we could even say that we're creating our world. If you look at yourself like, I'm an artist, a creator, creating my world. I can make stuff happen in the world. This all connects back to that locus of control idea. Are we just kind of victims of the world? We're just kind of having to cope with whatever the world throws at us? Or are we, the most powerful factor in our world, that we impact the world, that we do things, we reach out to the world and change it and shape it? If we start to look at ourselves in that way, it kind of shifts our thinking about ourselves, and it kind of shifting about our ideas about our mission. So getting outside of ourselves is important to our mental health and to our well-being. If we're all kind of focused on what's going on with us now, we kind of stay stuck there. And we kind of, our anxieties often are about feeling overwhelmed, that we're not able to cope. It's kind of a form of suffering, that anticipatory suffering, that this thing may happen, or I'm not going to be able to manage if such and such happens. The fact is that we have managed all of our lives. We've overcome and worked with all kinds of anxiety-provoking things, and we have lived to see this day. And so we have managed everything that life has thrown at us, and we start to realize that we can manage everything that life has to offer. Sometimes it seems like we can't, but we actually do find the resources that are available that we need to manage in a situation when it actually arrives. And so this idea that we can cope, and that we're built to cope. And so if we have that idea, that overriding idea, and we start to think of ourselves as capable copers, and that we can manage those things, then those things don't seem so overwhelming and big to us. And if we are sort of down on that, as if we're supposed to be always good. We're always supposed to be happy and joyful, and everything's supposed to be working smoothly in our lives. If we think that's the way it's supposed to be, then when challenging things happen, we resist those and think that shouldn't happen. This isn't fair. It shouldn't, these things ought not to happen. But that's simply part of life, is that challenging things do happen. And if you just look at the world, the history of the world, and stuff that's going on in the world right now, in the news, there's challenging things going on. There's always something challenging. And that's actually what makes us grow, is our challenges and our struggle. And we don't have to suffer in those struggles. This is where the idea of mindfulness comes in, one of the ideas of mindfulness. And I always recommend people to read Eckhart Tolle. There's a couple of books that he has written called The Power of Now and A New Earth. And he has videos and things that you can watch too. He's got a website and stuff. But anyway, Eckhart has been an influence for me and probably for a lot of people. And it encompasses the kind of larger kind of idea of mindfulness. Mindfulness being that we need to start to focus on the here and the now, start to sort of push away our preconceived notions about the way things are and the way things ought to be. So Eckhart would say resisting the world. When we resist, that means that we're saying things shouldn't be this way. This is not the way it's supposed to be. I don't accept that this is what's happening, when in fact it actually is happening. So it's really doing a real reality check and accepting that this is the way it is at this moment. The reality is this. The reality is what's actually happening. The reality is what we're feeling. Sometimes we're feeling badly, and we have to start from a place of acceptance of our depression, of our anxiety, before that can change. And so a mindfulness perspective is this acceptance, staying focused in the present, not letting our minds kind of run away in the future or ruminate about the past, staying present and focused, coming from a point of view of acceptance and non-resistance of what is. And if we come to that place of acceptance, a lot of our suffering disappears. We may not be pleased and thrilled about whatever's happening, but if we come to a place of acceptance, it makes it a lot easier to cope. And if we start to think about the fact that how we feel is sometimes a choice. It is a choice. I've been talking a little bit about how do we shift out of a particular state. And we want happiness. Often we don't want to be happy, and we're not happy because we're miserable and there's things going on. But if we start to shift, use some tools to shift out of our states, we can actually say, how do I want to feel? Oh, what if I just choose to feel happy right now? What if in this moment I just choose to feel happy? And some of the ways we can choose to feel happy is how we focus our attention. So a great tool is a gratitude journal, or just feeling grateful. Just feeling grateful for things in your life. And sometimes it's a challenge to actually write down, what are 3 things I'm grateful for? And when you start to train your perception on things that you can feel good about and have gratitude for, it starts to change how we feel, that we can feel happy for what we have right now. So we make a choice to be happy. So, and this is another way of feeling the internal locus of control, when we decide that we can choose it. And Viktor Frankl is a famous psychiatrist that was imprisoned he was Jewish, he was imprisoned in the concentration camps in Auschwitz, actually. And he wrote about his experiences, and that he was able to find a place in all of that terror and suffering, to come to a place of acceptance. And he said that he always had one choice. He always had a choice. They could take everything away from him except, how he chose to see and view a situation, and how he chose to feel about it. So this speaks to the power of choosing how we feel and what we think. And yeah, we can train ourselves, change our thoughts, change our perspectives. We can start to see ourselves not as a suffering being with all these things happening to us, but somebody who's on a heroic journey. reframe our journey like that, our life like that. We're on a heroic journey. Our mission here is not to be happy, but to find our challenges, to overcome our challenges, our adversities. So all of the old hero stories, the old Greek myths and things like that. If you hear, so even movies, what makes it interesting is people that have to overcome adversity. The story isn't about how they're happy. Sometimes at the end of the movie, there's a point of happiness, but all the movie has really been about how they're struggling and how they're overcoming the challenge. And so that's kind of, we could look at our lives that way, that, we're not meant to always be kind of great and happy. What we're here doing is striving, and we're overcoming challenges, and we're finding, we're making choices, and we're defining our lives, that we're in control of our own definition of our lives, how we choose to see it. And I often talk about, to people that I work with, one of the main challenges is self-worth issues, is that people feel that they're not valued, not valuable, not important, and there's a strong pain that comes with anything that indicates that they are not valuable or worthy of some, and so on. That's their interpretation. And I say, nobody is going to give you your worth. And even if they told you you're worthy and all that, we would only believe that for a short time, and then we'd need to get that reinforced again. And that's ultimately because we don't believe it. And there's only one person that can give you your value, and that's you. You have to choose your value. So we get to decide who we are, and we also get to decide our value. We get to decide that we are valuable and what things we choose to value about ourselves. And that is a foundational work, is to choose our value, choose who we are, how we see ourselves, and what our role is in life. It's only up to us to decide that. And so if we reframe our lives in a way that we are not always supposed to be comfortable, we're not always supposed to be happy, and maybe what's more important is that we're learning, that we're striving, that we're growing, that we're contributing to the world, that we're shaping our world around us. And we can simply do that. We do it every day. You clean the house and you're changing your world. Do the dishes, you're changing the world. There's many ways we can think of to impact our world. We choose our meaning. And so meaning is very important. That's a big, it's a kind of a meta view that ultimately is the thing that takes us beyond our sort of day-to-day mental health things. We got to get outside of ourselves, take the larger view, start to see ourselves as a force that can contribute. One of the things that you can do that helps us get out of ourselves is to do something for someone or something. Do some kindness, the random acts of kindness we're here talking about. You can do something to beautify your world, or just go to a park and clean it up. That makes a difference. To treat pets and animals, feeding birds and animals, treating them well, just to nurture something, to do a positive post on your Facebook, anything. So if you start to have a little mission of contributing positively to the world and see ourselves as on a journey, a heroic journey, and heroes, when you look at hero stories, most of their story isn't about being happy. It's not, and it's certainly not about being comfortable. All hero stories are about people going outside their comfort zone, doing something beyond what they even thought they could do, facing fears and barriers and overcoming those barriers. So think of yourself as a movie. Make yourself a good movie. It's great movies aren't about people that are happy and comfortable through the whole movie. Those are little points that they may come to, but the whole thing is about that striving, about reaching out, about overcoming, about gaining a perspective, and start to see the joy in life. Start to use that exercise of gratitude and really understand what is there in our world, in your world, to be grateful for. Start to see the world as the glass is half full rather than half empty. So we get to figure all this stuff out. Take that larger view. This is where a spiritual perspective can be helpful too. I think having a spiritual perspective is very important. What are your spiritual ideas and beliefs? Some people believe in reincarnation. If you have that idea that, this isn't my only life that I'm living, and I chose this life for a purpose, and I'm here to do something or experience something or learn something. And so that's my larger purpose. And maybe I've got many lives to live, and I've lived many lives and gone through many experiences, and this is the experience that I chose. And so what about these particular challenges am I supposed to learn from? So taking a spiritual, but that's just one example of a kind of larger spiritual perspective. But if you have a spirituality, it's very important to draw on that, to draw on sort of that gives us ideas about larger meanings of life and the bigger picture of things. So just tap into those larger perspectives, take some time to step back, see yourself in a different way as an agent, as to contribute to the world, that comfort and happiness isn't the goal, that maybe it's our striving and it's our working with whatever particular fabric that we have been given for our lives is what it's all about, and then get to it. So all of these are just offering a larger perspective that can help us frame the world and help us to move forward with our mental health issues, because mental health issues are often being stuck in our particular little world, our point of view, and not moving out of that. So that's my thoughts for the day. If you have any thoughts or comments that you'd like to add, please add those, and please give me some feedback, like the page, make comments, forward on to a friend or whatever. And yes, I did have tea. I'm not sure if I demonstrated that. I do have tea today, as always. And so thank you for joining me. And I'll see you next week for yet another talk. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.